A flight attendant locked her fist around an 8-year-old girl's arm and ripped her upward out of her seat. The seatbelt caught the child's body. The bone didn't hold. It snapped. Right there. 35,000 feet in the air. The girl's scream shattered first class into dead silence. And this woman, this senior flight attendant, she looked down at that child's arm hanging at an angle that made grown men turn away, and she didn't reach for help. She started making excuses. She didn't know the girl's father was a captain sitting 15 feet away in the cockpit. She didn't know he had evidence that would ground every single plane this airline ever flew. She was about to find out. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and stay with this story to the very end. Drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this one travels. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Daniel Carter's phone rang at 4:12 in the morning, and he was already awake. 22 years of flying will do that to a man. His body didn't need permission to start the day. It just started. He picked up on the first ring. Is she up? She's brushing her teeth, Laura said. No hello, no small talk. That ended with the marriage. She still thinks she's visiting my sister. Good, that's the plan. Daniel, if anything goes sideways with this flight, I swear to God. Nothing's going sideways. I booked the seat myself. She's in the system, VIP notation, captain's family, everything is locked in. Laura went quiet for a second. She asked about you last night. Daniel's chest tightened. What'd she say? She asked if you were going to miss her birthday again. He closed his eyes. He could hear Emma's voice in his head asking that question. Not angry, not whining, just that calm, matter-of-fact way she had of saying things that cut right through you without raising her voice. She's going to walk off that plane in London, and I'm going to be standing right there, Daniel said. That's a promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've never missed a landing, Laura. I'm not missing this one. He hung up and sat there for a minute, holding the phone, staring at the photo on his lock screen. Emma. 2 missing teeth in that picture, but they'd grown back since. Pink backpack, braids pulled tight, standing next to his leg at the airport, 14 months ago, before the divorce split his life into a custody calendar and turned his daughter into a scheduling negotiation. He pulled up the booking one more time. Flight 2416, JFK to Heathrow, seat 1A, first class, Emma Carter, age 8. VIP, captain's family. Everything was in order. He closed the laptop, grabbed his flight bag, and headed for the door. Now let me tell you about Rachel Whitmore, because you need to understand who this woman was before you understand what she did. Rachel had been a flight attendant for 11 years, senior purser, lead cabin crew on international routes. She ran her cabin like a woman who believed the airplane belonged to her from the moment the doors closed. Other crew members had a name for it. They called it Rachel's Kingdom. And in Rachel's Kingdom, she decided who got respect and who didn't. 2 months before this flight, a junior attendant named Keisha had watched Rachel relocate a family from business class to economy. No reason given, no seat discrepancy. Rachel just looked at them, looked at the cabin, and told them there'd been a reconfiguration. Keisha had pulled Rachel aside in the galley afterward. Those people had assigned seats. You can't just move them. Rachel didn't even look at her. I'm senior purser. I can manage my cabin however I see fit. That's not managing. That's what, Keisha? Finish your sentence. Keisha didn't finish. Nobody ever finished. Because Rachel had 11 years of seniority, a list of high-value clients who requested her by name, and a management team that treated passenger complaints like background noise. 3 formal complaints in 2 years. Nothing happened. Not a write-up, not a warning. Not even a conversation that lasted longer than 5 minutes. Rachel told a colleague once, over drinks in a hotel bar in Frankfurt, "They're not going to touch me. I'm too valuable. You know what happens when a first-class passenger complains about turbulence and I hand them a warm towel and a glass of Bordeaux, and suddenly they're writing a thank you letter to the CEO? That's what I bring. Some kid's mother crying about a seat change doesn't outweigh that." She believed it. Completely. And the airline let her believe it because they never gave her a single reason not to. The morning of Flight 2416, Rachel reviewed the first-class manifest at the crew briefing. She scanned the names. She saw seat 1A, Emma Carter, unaccompanied minor. She didn't read the VIP notation. She didn't need to. She'd already decided. Now, Emma. Emma Carter was 8 years old, and she was not the kind of kid who fell apart under pressure. Her teachers called her unusually composed. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Feldstein, a 73-year-old Russian woman who didn't give compliments to anyone, told Daniel at a recital last spring, "Your daughter doesn't just play the notes. She means them. I've taught 40 years. I can count on one hand the students who play like they mean it." Emma had been playing since she was 4. Chopin. Not perfectly, but with something in her hands that made people stop talking and listen. She practiced 45 minutes every day. Nobody made her. Nobody reminded her. She just sat down at the bench and played because that was what her hands were supposed to do. Daniel asked her once, "Why do you love it so much?" Emma thought about it for a second. "Because I can say things with music that I don't know how to say with words, and people still understand." She was 8. That's who sat in seat 1A with a pink backpack and a boarding pass held carefully in both hands. An airline chaperone named Priya walked Emma to the gate, helped her board, and got her settled. Priya was 24, kind, patient. She showed Emma the entertainment system and how to call for a flight attendant. "Your dad's a pilot, huh?" Priya said. "He flies big planes," Emma said. "He told me first class has warm cookies." "He's absolutely right. I'll make sure someone brings you one." Priya noted in the system that the child was settled and comfortable. She left the aircraft. Standard procedure, gate to seat. Job done. For 20 minutes, everything was fine. Emma buckled in. She watched the ground crew through the window. She thought about London, about her Aunt Rebecca, about the birthday cake she'd been promised. She had no idea her father was sitting 20 feet away in the cockpit, grinning to himself, counting down the hours to Heathrow. The plane pushed back, taxied, took off. Normal. Then Rachel Whitmore walked down the aisle. She was doing her first class round, greeting passengers, offering drinks. She stopped at 1B. Warm smile. She stopped at 1C. "Champagne, ma'am?" All charm. Then she reached 1A. The smile didn't drop. It just went dead behind the eyes, like somebody flipped a switch. The man in 2B saw it happen. Gregory Harmon, 46, hedge fund. He'd spent 20 years reading faces across boardroom tables, and he knew exactly what that expression meant. He lowered his newspaper and watched. "Sweetie," Rachel said, and the word came out like lemon juice on a paper cut. "I think there's been a mix-up with your seat. Can I see your boarding pass?" Emma pulled it from her backpack, held it up. "It says 1A. That's this seat." Rachel took it, studied it, took her time, handed it back. "Wait here." She walked to the galley, picked up the interphone, called Diane, another attendant who'd flown with her for 6 years. "There's a kid in 1A, Rachel said, unaccompanied. Something's off." Diane checked her tablet. Emma Carter, VIP notation. Captain's family. "She's flagged and verified, Rachel." "I don't care what the screen says. She doesn't match." Diane paused. She knew what that meant. She'd heard Rachel use that word before. Doesn't match. She knew exactly what Rachel was really saying. "Rachel, the booking is clean. Just leave it. I'm the senior purser. This cabin is my responsibility. If there's an issue, it's on me." "There isn't an issue. I'll handle it." Rachel hung up. Diane stood there holding the phone, sick to her stomach, knowing she should say something, do something, call someone. She didn't. She never did. 6 years of looking the other way. 6 years of telling herself it wasn't her problem. Rachel walked back to 1A. No smile this time. "Sweetie, I need you to come with me. There's a problem with your seat." "But I showed you my boarding pass." "Sometimes the computer makes mistakes. We need to sort this out in the back." "My dad booked this seat. He's a pilot for this airline." Something flashed across Rachel's face. Not doubt, irritation. The particular irritation of someone who is not used to hearing the word no from anyone, let alone an 8-year-old. "Lots of people say lots of things, sweetheart. Unbuckle your seatbelt and come with me. Now." Emma shook her head. Not dramatic, not rude, the way a child does when they know they're right and can't figure out why the adult doesn't. "No, this is my seat." Gregory Harmon put his newspaper down completely. Across the aisle, Margaret Chen, 71, retired teacher, 38 years in a classroom, leaned forward. She'd seen adults bully children before. She knew what it looked like. Her hand gripped the armrest. Rachel bent down close to Emma's face, close enough to crowd her, close enough to make the cabin feel small. "If you do not get up right now, I will call the captain. I will have this plane turned around, and you will be escorted off by security in handcuffs. Is that what you want? Because I will make that happen." Emma's chin trembled. One tear broke free and ran down her cheek. But she didn't unbuckle. She held the armrests with both hands and said, in a voice so quiet and so steady it made Gregory Harmon's throat close, "My daddy told me to sit here. I'm not moving." Rachel straightened up, her jaw locked. "Fine, we do this the hard way." She reached down and grabbed Emma's left arm above the wrist. Hard. Not a guide, not a nudge, a grip made to move a body that didn't want to move. "Let go," Emma pulled back. "You're hurting me." Gregory was on his feet. "What are you doing? That's a child." "Sir, sit down. This is a crew matter." "That is not a crew matter. That is assault." Margaret stood up. "Take your hands off that little girl right now." Rachel didn't let go. She pulled harder, upward. The seatbelt held Emma's waist to the chair, her arms stretched between Rachel's fist and the locked belt, the bone bending at an angle that made Gregory's stomach turn. "Stop!" Emma screamed. "Please stop!" Rachel yanked. The snap hit every ear in that cabin like a gunshot. Not a crack, not a pop, a wet, sharp break. The sound of living bone giving way under force. Emma's scream tore through the aircraft. Not fear anymore. Pain. The kind of pain that empties a child's lungs and fills them with nothing but raw, animal agony. The kind of sound that reaches inside a parent's chest and pulls their heart out through their ribs. Rachel let go. She stepped back. Emma's left forearm bent where no joint existed. The angle was wrong. Horribly, obviously wrong. The cabin was silent for exactly 1 second. Then it erupted. Margaret was screaming for a doctor. A pediatric nurse named Sandra in row 3 was already unbuckling, already moving. Gregory Harmon had his phone up, recording, his hand steady because he understood in his bones that what he just witnessed was going to matter in a courtroom. Sandra reached Emma, looked at the arm, and her face went gray. "Compound fracture. Nobody touch her. I need something rigid for a splint. Anything." A man in 3A handed over a hardcover book without a word. Rachel stood in the aisle. She hadn't moved, hadn't pressed a call button, hadn't reached for a first aid kit. She was standing there, recalculating, rewiring the story in her head in real time. "She jerked away," Rachel said. "I barely touched her. She moved suddenly and—" "I have it all on video," Gregory said. "Every second. Don't even try it." Rachel's face drained. Not guilt. Realization. The realization that the walls were already closing in and there was no room left to maneuver. Then the cockpit door opened. Daniel Carter stepped out. He'd heard the scream through the interphone. Not a call, not a report, just the sound. His daughter's sound, a frequency he carried in his DNA. He'd heard it once before, when Emma was 5 and caught her lip on a swing set. He would know that sound in a hurricane. He would know it underwater. He would know it dead. He walked, not fast, not slow, deliberate. Every person in that cabin expected a father to come out swinging, shouting, losing control. What they got was worse. Daniel Carter walked like a man who had already decided everything. Every step measured, every breath even. His face showed nothing, and that nothing was the most terrifying thing anyone on that plane had ever seen. He reached row 1. He looked at Emma. He saw the arm. He saw the angle. He saw the tears pouring down her face. He knelt beside her. He took her right hand and pressed it flat against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. "Daddy's here." "Daddy, it hurts so bad." "I know, baby, I know it does. I'm here. I'm not leaving." He stood. He looked at Rachel. She recognized the stripes. 4 bars. Captain. Then she read the name on his wings, and the blood left her face like someone had opened a drain. Carter. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Daniel spoke to Sandra first. "Can you stabilize her?" "I'm working on it. She needs a hospital." He turned to the cockpit, walked in, looked at the captain flying the plane, a man named Jim Beckett, who he'd trained 6 years ago. "Turn this plane around." "Daniel, what happened back there?" "A crew member just broke my daughter's arm. I need medical on the ground and law enforcement at the gate. Turn the aircraft around now." Jim didn't ask a second question. The plane banked. Daniel walked back to Emma. He sat on the armrest beside her. He held her good hand. He stroked her hair. He whispered things that only she could hear while Sandra taped the splint and the aircraft descended toward New York. Gregory Harmon sat in 2B, the video saved in 3 separate places, because he was the kind of man who knew evidence disappears when money gets scarce. Margaret sat across the aisle, 71 years old, tears on her face, one hand pressed to her mouth, because she had seen a lot in her life. But she had never seen a grown woman break a child and stand there looking bothered about the paperwork. Diane stood in the galley, shaking, replaying the phone call in her head, hearing herself say nothing when she should have said everything. And Rachel Whitmore stood at the back of the first-class cabin, arms at her sides, watching a father hold his broken daughter. And for the first time in 11 years, understanding that no amount of seniority, no list of languages, no collection of thank you letters from wealthy passengers was going to save her from what was coming. Emma pressed her face into her father's chest. Her birthday surprise was destroyed. Her arm was in pieces. Her dream of playing Chopin lived in fingers that might never move the same way again. But her father was here. His heartbeat was under her hand, his voice was in her ear, and inside Daniel Carter, behind the steady hands and the even breathing and the measured steps, something was building that had nothing to do with rage and everything to do with ruin. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to threaten. He wasn't going to give interviews or write angry letters or accept whatever check the airline's lawyers slid across the table. He was going to dismantle the entire machine, piece by piece, starting tonight. The wheels hit the runway at JFK at 6:47 p.m., and Daniel Carter had not let go of his daughter's hand for a single second since the plane turned around. Emma had stopped crying somewhere over the Atlantic, not because the pain stopped, because her body ran out of energy to express it. She sat there with her eyes half closed, her broken arm resting on the hardcover book splint, her breathing shallow and fast, and her right hand wrapped around her father's fingers so tightly that his knuckles ached. Daniel didn't move, didn't shift, didn't adjust. If his daughter needed to crush his hand to get through the next 10 minutes, she could crush it until the bones turned to dust. The plane taxied to an isolated gate, not the terminal, the emergency apron. Daniel could see the lights through the cockpit window before the aircraft even stopped moving. 3 police cruisers, an ambulance, 2 black SUVs that he knew belonged to Port Authority. Jim Beckett, the captain flying the plane, had radioed ahead. Assault on a minor. Suspect is a crew member. Medical required for an 8-year-old with a compound fracture. Send everyone. They sent everyone. The moment the aircraft door opened, 2 paramedics came up the jet bridge at a run. The first one, a woman named Torres, took one look at Emma's arm, and her voice changed from professional to urgent in half a breath. "Sweetheart, I need you to stay very still for me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded. She didn't let go of Daniel's hand. "Sir, are you the father?" "Yes." "We need to get her off the aircraft and into the ambulance. The arm needs imaging immediately. Based on what I can see, this is going to require surgery." Daniel's jaw tightened. Surgery. Plates. Screws. His 8-year-old daughter on an operating table because a flight attendant decided she didn't belong in her own seat. "Do whatever you need to do," he said. "I'm coming with her." Torres looked at her partner. "Get the stretcher up here now." While they worked to move Emma, 2 Port Authority police officers stepped into the first-class cabin. The lead officer, a man named Sergeant Reeves, scanned the space, saw the passengers still in their seats, saw the tension on every face, and then saw Rachel Whitmore standing at the back of the cabin near the galley, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Who's the crew member involved in the incident?" Reeves asked. Gregory Harmon didn't hesitate. He pointed. "Her, Rachel Whitmore, senior purser. I watched her grab the child's arm and pull until it broke. I have the entire thing on video." Reeves looked at Rachel. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." Rachel's arms dropped to her sides. "This is a misunderstanding. The child was in the wrong seat. I was following procedure. She moved suddenly and I—" "Ma'am, come with us. Now. I want to speak to my union representative. You can make that call at the station. Step off the aircraft." Rachel looked around the cabin. She looked at Diane, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at Gregory, who was still holding his phone like a weapon. She looked at Margaret, who stared back at her with 71 years of righteous fury burning in her face. Nobody was on her side. Not one person. Rachel walked off the plane. Reeves cuffed her at the bottom of the jet bridge. She didn't resist, but her face contorted into something between disbelief and outrage. The face of a person who still believed this was happening to her unfairly. 7:22 p.m. Jamaica Hospital Medical Center, Emergency Department. Daniel sat in a plastic chair next to Emma's bed while a trauma team evaluated her arm. The x-rays were already up on the screen. He could read them. 22 years around aviation medicine had taught him enough to know what a bad break looked like. This was a bad break. The radius was snapped clean through. Displaced. The ulna had a hairline fracture running 2 inches along its length. There was soft tissue damage around the joint. The orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Amari, pulled Daniel into the hallway. "The good news is, we can fix the bone. Plate and screws. She's young, bones heal fast at her age." "What's the bad news?" Dr. Amari paused. "There's potential nerve involvement. The ulnar nerve runs very close to the fracture site. We won't know the extent of the damage until after surgery and recovery. But I have to be honest with you, Captain Carter. If there's nerve damage, she may have reduced sensation and motor control in her 4th and 5th fingers." Daniel stood there. He didn't react. He didn't speak. He processed the information the way he processed an engine failure at V1. Absorb, assess, act. "Her 4th and 5th fingers," he said. "Yes. She plays piano." Dr. Amari's face changed. The professional distance cracked just slightly. "I'm sorry. How long until we know?" "Months. Nerve recovery is slow, sometimes incomplete." Daniel nodded, walked back into the room, sat down next to Emma. She was drowsy now, the pain medication pulling her toward sleep. "Daddy? I'm here. Am I going to be able to play piano again?" He looked at her face, those brown eyes fighting to stay open. That question, asked the way only a child can ask it, with no armor, no preparation for a bad answer, just pure trust that her father would tell her the truth. "The doctors are going to take really good care of you," he said, "and whatever happens, I'm going to be right here." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't an answer either, and Emma was too tired to notice. She fell asleep, holding his hand. Daniel sat there in the dark. The monitors beeped, the hallway hummed with hospital noise, and inside his chest, something that had been building since he first saw that arm hanging at the wrong angle, finally crystallized into a single, clear thought. This wasn't just about Rachel Whitmore. 8:45 p.m., Daniel stepped into the hallway and called his ex-wife. Laura picked up before the first ring finished. "Is she okay? Daniel, is she okay?" "She's in surgery prep, compound fracture, radius and ulna. They're putting in a plate and screws." Laura made a sound that wasn't a word. A mother's sound. The sound of a woman absorbing the worst phone call of her life. "I'm coming. I'm on my way right now." "Laura, there's something else. The doctor said there might be nerve damage. Her ring finger and her pinky." Silence. "Her piano hand," Laura whispered. "Yes." "Daniel, who did this?" "A flight attendant, senior purser. She tried to remove Emma from her seat, grabbed her arm, and pulled while the seatbelt was locked. I heard the brake from the cockpit." "You were on the plane?" "Cockpit jump seat. I was dead heading to London. That was the surprise. I was going to be there when she landed." Laura started crying. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that's worse. The kind that comes when the universe takes the one thing you were trying to protect and destroys it while you're 20 feet away. I'm going to fix this, Daniel said. How? How do you fix a broken arm and nerve damage? I'm not just talking about the arm. Laura stopped crying. She knew that tone. She'd been married to the man for 12 years. She knew the difference between Daniel angry and Daniel decided. What are you going to do? What I should have done 2 years ago. 9:15 p.m. Emma went into surgery. Daniel kissed her forehead before they wheeled her through the double doors. She was already under sedation, but he said it anyway. I'll be right here when you wake up, baby girl. Then he walked to the waiting room, sat down, pulled out his phone, and opened a folder he'd been building for 26 months. It was labeled Skybridge Internal. See, here's what the airline didn't know Daniel had. Here's what nobody knew. 2 years before this flight, Daniel Carter was assigned to evaluate Skybridge's maintenance program as part of his role as Senior Check Airman. Check Airmen don't just evaluate pilots. They evaluate systems, safety protocols, operational compliance. And what Daniel found during that review made his stomach turn. Deferred maintenance items stacking up faster than they were being resolved, structural inspections postponed because completing them would take aircraft out of revenue service, pressure from operations managers on maintenance crews to sign off on jobs that hadn't been fully completed, internal emails between the VP of Operations and the Director of Maintenance discussing how to manage the schedule around overdue inspections without triggering FAA flags. Daniel had raised concerns through the company's internal safety reporting system. He filed 3 reports in 6 months. The first one got a form letter response. Thank you for your commitment to safety. Your concerns have been reviewed. The second one got a phone call from his fleet manager. Daniel, we appreciate your diligence, but you need to trust that maintenance has this under control. You're a pilot, not a mechanic. The third one got a meeting with the Vice President of Flight Operations, a man named Richard Caldwell, who sat across from Daniel in a conference room in Skybridge's corporate headquarters and said, with a smile that didn't touch his eyes, Danny, you're one of our best. Don't ruin that by becoming a problem. Every airline defers maintenance items. It's managed risk. That's how the industry works. Managed risk with people's lives, Daniel said. Managed risk with acceptable parameters. The FAA allows deferral windows for a reason. You're blowing past those windows, Richard. I've seen the data. The data is being handled. By who? By people whose job it is to handle it, not yours. Daniel left that meeting knowing 2 things. 1, the company was not going to fix this from the inside. 2, if he went public without proof, they would destroy his career and call him a disgruntled employee. So he started collecting, quietly, carefully. Every deferred maintenance report he could access, every internal email that crossed his desk, every discrepancy he found during his check airman duties. He built the file over 26 months, document by document, never telling anyone, not Laura, not his union rep, not a single colleague. He was waiting for the right moment. He never expected the right moment to come, because someone broke his daughter's arm. 11:30 p.m. Emma was out of surgery. Dr. Amari met Daniel in the hallway. Surgery went well. The plate is in, the bone is aligned. But I need to tell you, we did find compression on the ulnar nerve. It's not severed, which is good, but there's significant bruising and swelling around the nerve sheath. We won't know functional outcome for 8 to 12 weeks. Give me a percentage. Captain Carter, I don't like to. Give me a number. Dr. Amari looked at him. 50-50, maybe 60-40 in her favor. But I want to be clear. Even in the best case, she may not regain full dexterity. Fine motor control at the level required for concert piano performances, that's a high bar. Daniel thanked him, walked into recovery, sat next to Emma. She was still unconscious, her left arm wrapped in bandages, an IV in her right hand, monitors tracking every heartbeat. Laura arrived at midnight. She'd driven from Connecticut. She walked into the room, saw Emma, and her legs gave out. Daniel caught her. For the first time in 2 years, they held each other. Not as ex-husband and ex-wife. as two parents standing over their broken child. "I'm going to end them," Daniel said into Laura's hair. "I need you to know that." "I know," she said. "Do it." 6:45 a.m. the next morning, 14 hours after the plane landed. Daniel Carter walked into the lobby of the Federal Aviation Administration headquarters in Washington, D.C. He hadn't slept. He'd driven straight from the hospital after Laura's sister arrived to stay with Emma. 4 hours on I-95 with a folder on the passenger seat that was about to end an airline. He asked to speak with the Director of Aviation Safety. The receptionist told him the director wasn't available without an appointment. Daniel placed his Skybridge identification badge on the counter. Captain, Senior Check Airman, 22 years of service, 15,000 flight hours. Tell him Captain Daniel Carter is here with evidence of systemic maintenance fraud affecting the structural airworthiness of the Skybridge fleet. Tell him if he doesn't see me in the next 30 minutes, I'm walking across the street to the Washington Post. The receptionist picked up the phone. 14 minutes later, Daniel was sitting in a conference room with the Director of Aviation Safety, 2 senior inspectors, and an FAA counsel attorney. He opened the folder. The first document was an internal Skybridge email from 17 months ago. Richard Caldwell, VP of Operations, to Marcus Webb, Director of Maintenance. Subject line, Fleet Utilization versus Inspection Backlog. Daniel read it out loud. "Marcus, we cannot afford to pull 6 aircraft for D-checks this quarter. The revenue impact is north of $40 million. Find a way to extend the intervals. Use the deferral provisions creatively. I don't care how you document it. Just keep those planes flying." The room went silent. Daniel laid down the second document, a maintenance log showing that 14 Skybridge aircraft had exceeded their structural inspection intervals by an average of 11 months. 3 of them were wide-body jets flying transatlantic routes, carrying 300 passengers each, every single day. The third document was a safety report filed by a maintenance technician named Carlos Rivera. Carlos had flagged fatigue cracking on a wing spar fitting during a routine check. His supervisor overrode the finding and returned the aircraft to service. Carlos filed a report. The report was buried. The aircraft flew 47 more revenue flights before the fitting was eventually replaced during an unrelated repair. If that fitting had failed in severe turbulence, Daniel said, the wing could have separated from the fuselage. 312 people were on that aircraft. The FAA director looked at the inspectors. The inspectors looked at the attorney. The attorney looked at Daniel. "Captain Carter, how long have you had this documentation?" "I've been collecting it for over 2 years. I tried to address it internally. I was told to stop asking questions." "Why are you coming forward now?" Daniel paused. He thought about Emma, the splint, the surgery, the 50-50 chance her fingers would ever move the same way again. He thought about the snap that he heard through the interphone and would hear every night for the rest of his life. "Because yesterday a crew member on one of your certificated aircraft broke my 8-year-old daughter's arm. And when I started asking why a person like that was allowed to operate unchecked, I realized the answer was the same reason these maintenance issues exist unchecked. The airline doesn't care. They care about revenue. They care about schedules. They care about keeping problems quiet. They do not care about the people inside those airplanes." He pushed the entire folder across the table. "Every document in this folder is authenticated and traceable. Internal emails, maintenance logs, deferred inspection records, safety reports that were filed and buried. This airline is flying aircraft that should be grounded. And if you don't act on this today and something happens tomorrow, it won't just be on Skybridge. It'll be on you." The director picked up his phone. He made one call. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, the FAA issued an emergency airworthiness directive covering the entire Skybridge fleet. Every plane in the air received the same message: return to gate, immediate grounding, no exceptions. 47 aircraft, 19 airports, 14,000 passengers stranded in a single afternoon. Daniel Carter stood outside the FAA building, his phone was ringing. Reporters, his union, Skybridge corporate, Laura, everyone. He answered none of them. He stood on the sidewalk in Washington, D.C., looked up at the sky where not a single Skybridge aircraft was flying for the first time in the airline's 31-year history, and he felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not revenge, not triumph. He felt tired. He wanted to go back to the hospital and hold his daughter's hand and tell her everything was going to be okay, even though he didn't know if it was. But he couldn't, not yet, because the grounding was only the beginning. The airline was going to fight back. They always did. They were going to call him a disgruntled employee, a man on a revenge mission, an unstable pilot weaponizing the FAA over a personal grievance. They were going to come after his career, his pension, his credibility, and everything he'd built in 22 years. And Daniel Carter, standing on that sidewalk, running on zero sleep and hospital coffee and a father's fury that had not yet begun to cool, made himself one promise: let them come. The first call came 47 minutes after the grounding order went public. Daniel was still standing on the sidewalk outside the FAA building when his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Skybridge Corporate. He let it ring. It went to voicemail. 12 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. He let it ring. Voicemail. The third time, a different number. This one he recognized. Alan Marsh, Chief Legal Counsel for Skybridge Airways, the man who made problems go away for a living. Daniel answered. Captain Carter, this is Alan Marsh. I know who you are. I need you to understand the gravity of what's happening right now. You've triggered an FAA emergency directive that has grounded our entire fleet. 14,000 passengers are stranded. Our stock is in free fall. The board is in emergency session. This is a crisis, Daniel. A crisis you created. Daniel switched the phone to his other ear. A crew member on your aircraft broke my daughter's arm yesterday. She's in a hospital bed with plates and screws in her radius and possible permanent nerve damage. You want to talk to me about a crisis? Talk to her. I understand you're upset. What happened to your daughter is unacceptable. We've already terminated Rachel Whitmore. She is no longer employed by Skybridge. The company is prepared to take full responsibility for the incident and provide comprehensive compensation for Emma's medical care and recovery. Comprehensive compensation? We're prepared to offer a settlement, generous, immediate, along with a guarantee that every cost associated with Emma's treatment, rehabilitation, and any future care will be covered in full. In exchange for what? Marsh paused, just a half second, but Daniel heard it. The pause of a man choosing his words the way a surgeon chooses a blade. In exchange for a mutual agreement to resolve this matter privately, a non-disclosure agreement covering the incident and any related communications, and your cooperation in clarifying to the FAA that the maintenance documentation you provided may have been taken out of context. Daniel almost laughed. Almost. You want me to recant. I want you to consider the full picture, Daniel. You have 22 years with this company, a pension, benefits, a reputation. If this goes to litigation, it gets ugly. For everyone, including you, including Emma. Her name will be in every newspaper. Her medical records will be subpoenaed. Defense attorneys will question her credibility. She's 8 years old. Do you want to put her through that? Don't you dare use my daughter as a bargaining chip. I'm not bargaining. I'm being honest with you. We can make this right, quietly, generously, and without dragging a child through a public spectacle. Or we can go to war. And in war, Daniel, everybody bleeds. Daniel stood there. The traffic on Independence Avenue hummed past him. He thought about Emma in that hospital bed, the bandages, the IV, the question she asked before she fell asleep. Am I going to be able to play piano again? Alan, let me be honest with you. I'm not interested in your settlement. I'm not signing an NDA, and I'm not telling the FAA that the documentation I provided was taken out of context, because it wasn't. Every document in that folder is real. Every email is authenticated. Every maintenance log is verifiable. Your airline is flying structurally compromised aircraft, and you know it. Daniel, I'm not finished. You terminated Rachel Whitmore to make her the scapegoat. One rogue employee, an isolated incident. That's the story you're going to sell. But she's not the story. The story is that your company built a system where people like Rachel thrive because nobody checks anything. Nobody questions anything. Complaints disappear. Safety reports get buried. Maintenance gets deferred until the metal is ready to crack. Rachel didn't happen in a vacuum. She happened because Skybridge made the vacuum. Silence on the line. 3 full seconds. "You're making a very dangerous decision, Captain Carter." "No. I made the decision last night. Right now, I'm just telling you about it." He hung up. 9:17 p.m. that same night. Gregory Harmon's living room in Greenwich, Connecticut. Gregory sat at his desk and uploaded the video. He'd thought about it all day. He'd consulted his attorney, who told him there were no legal restrictions on publishing it. He thought about the little girl's face. He thought about the sound of the bone breaking. He thought about Rachel's expression afterward, that look of irritation, like the child had inconvenienced her by having an arm that could break. He titled the video, "Flight Attendant Breaks 8-Year-Old's Arm on Skybridge Flight 2416. He posted it to Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. By midnight, it had 400,000 views. By 6 a.m., 11 million. By noon the next day, 42 million people had watched Rachel Whitmore grab an 8-year-old girl's arm and snap it while the child screamed for her to stop. The internet didn't just react, it detonated. Every news network in the country led with the story. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC. The video played on loop behind every anchor desk in America. The snap, the scream, Rachel's face, Daniel walking out of the cockpit, the way he knelt beside his daughter and pressed her hand to his chest. They played that part over and over. The kneeling, the hand on the chest, a father holding his broken child with a calm that made people cry just watching it. Daniel's phone didn't stop ringing. He didn't answer. He was at the hospital. He was sitting next to Emma, who had woken up that morning and asked for scrambled eggs and her iPad. She didn't know the video existed. She didn't know 42 million people had watched the worst moment of her life. Laura knew. Laura's sister called her at 7 a.m. and said, "Turn on the news." Laura turned it on, watched for 30 seconds, and threw up. She called Daniel. "They're showing her face. They're showing my baby's face on national television." Gregory Harmon posted the video. He witnessed everything. "I don't care who posted it. My daughter's face is everywhere. Every person in this country has seen her arm break." "She's 8, Daniel. She's 8 years old." "I know." "Can we get it taken down?" "It's been shared 40 million times. There's no taking it down." Laura went quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. "Then we use it. If the whole world is watching, they're going to watch what comes next, too." 48 hours after the grounding, Skybridge Corporate Headquarters, emergency board meeting. The CEO, a man named Thomas Britton, 61 years old, Harvard MBA, 17 years at the helm, sat at the head of a mahogany table and watched his empire dissolve in real time. The stock had lost 43% of its value in 2 days. Booking cancellations were running at 91%. 3 major credit card companies had suspended their co-branded Skybridge partnerships. The pilots' union had issued a statement supporting Daniel Carter. The Flight Attendants Union had issued a separate statement condemning Rachel Whitmore and calling for a full, independent review of crew conduct policies. Britton looked at Alan Marsh. "Where are we with Carter?" "He rejected the settlement. He rejected the NDA. He's not cooperating." "What does he want?" "He wants us to burn, Thomas. That's what he wants." Britton slammed his palm on the table. "Then we discredit him. He's a pilot with a personal grievance. His daughter got hurt, and he's on a revenge mission. We leak his personnel file. We find something." Marsh shook his head. "His file is clean. 22 years, 0 incidents, 0 disciplinary actions, 15,000 hours. He trained half our current captains. His safety record is spotless. There's nothing to find." "Then we find something else. His divorce, his custody arrangement, his finances. Everybody has something." "Thomas, I need you to hear me. 42 million people have watched a video of our employee breaking a child's arm. The FAA has grounded our fleet based on documentation he provided. If we go after this man personally, and the press finds out, which they will, this company is finished. Not in trouble, Finished. We're already finished. The room went quiet. Britton's face was red. His hands were shaking. 17 years of building this airline, and it was coming apart because of one flight attendant and one pilot and one 8-year-old girl in seat 1A. Richard Caldwell, the VP of Operations, the man who wrote the email about managing the inspection backlog, sat 3 chairs down and said nothing. He'd said nothing for 2 days. He'd been quietly deleting files from his office computer, not knowing that Daniel Carter had already provided copies of everything to the FAA. He was deleting ghosts. The real evidence was already in federal hands. 3 days after the grounding, Rachel Whitmore's arraignment, Queens Criminal Court. Rachel stood before the judge in civilian clothes, her hair down, her face drawn. She looked 10 years older than she had on that airplane. Her attorney, a man named Victor Phelps, who specialized in defending airline employees, stood beside her. The charge was aggravated assault on a minor, a felony. The prosecutor, ADA Michelle Torres, laid out the facts in under 3 minutes. The victim was 8 years old. The assault occurred on a commercial aircraft. The flight attendant used physical force against a restrained child. The result was a compound fracture requiring surgical intervention with possible permanent nerve damage. The people request remand, Your Honor. The defendant has shown no remorse for her actions. The assault was witnessed by multiple passengers and recorded on video. The severity of the injury to a minor child warrants detention. Phelps argued for bail. My client has no prior criminal record. She has been employed in the airline industry for 11 years with no history of violence. She is not a flight risk. She surrendered her passport voluntarily. The judge set bail at $250,000. Rachel posted it within hours. Someone paid it for her. The press never found out who. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Rachel's attorney had told her not to speak. She didn't listen. I want to make one thing clear, Rachel said into a cluster of microphones. I have dedicated my career to passenger safety. What happened on that flight was a misunderstanding that escalated. I did not intentionally harm that child. I was doing my job. A reporter shouted, "The video shows you grabbing her arm and pulling while she screamed for you to stop. How is that a misunderstanding?" Rachel's mouth opened, closed. Her attorney grabbed her elbow and steered her toward a waiting car. But the damage was done. That clip, Rachel calling a compound fracture a misunderstanding, played on every network within the hour. Public fury, which was already volcanic, went nuclear. 4 days after the grounding, Daniel received a call he didn't expect. He was at the hospital. Emma was awake, eating Jell-O, watching cartoons on her iPad with her right hand, while her left arm sat motionless in a cast. She hadn't tried to move her fingers yet. The doctor said not to rush it. Let the swelling go down. Let the nerve heal. Give it time. Daniel's phone buzzed. Washington, D.C. area code. Captain Carter, my name is Senator Patricia Holloway. I chair the Senate Commerce Committee. I'd like to speak with you about your experience with Skybridge Airways. Daniel walked into the hallway. Senator, I'm listening. I've seen the video. I've read the FAA's emergency directive, and my staff has been reviewing the documentation you submitted. I want you to know that I'm opening a formal investigation into Skybridge's maintenance practices and operational safety culture, and I'd like you to testify. Testify? Before the full committee, under oath, on national television. Daniel leaned against the hospital wall. He could hear Emma's cartoon playing through the door, some character laughing about something silly, normal kid sounds in the middle of a nightmare. Senator, I need to ask you something first. Go ahead. Is this about fixing the problem, or is this about getting your face on camera during an election year? Holloway paused. Most people didn't talk to senators like that. She liked it. Captain Carter, I've been fighting airline deregulation loopholes for 9 years. Every time I push for stronger safety oversight, the airline lobby spends $20 million to kill it. I've been waiting for a case this clear, this documented, this undeniable. I'm not going to pretend your daughter's injury isn't the catalyst. It is. But the problem you uncovered goes far beyond one child on one plane. You know that better than anyone. Yes, ma'am, I do. So will you testify? I'll testify. But I want something in return. Name it. I want the committee to subpoena Skybridge's internal communications. All of them. Not just what I provided. Everything. Every email between operations and maintenance for the past 5 years. Every buried safety report. Every overridden inspection finding. I gave the FAA what I had. But what I had is just what I could access. The real picture is worse. I guarantee it. How do you know? Because I've been inside that machine for 22 years, and what I saw was only what they let me see. Imagine what they were hiding. Holloway was quiet for a beat. I'll issue the subpoenas tomorrow. One more thing. Yes? I want Diane Marsh to testify. She's a flight attendant who was on that flight. She knew what Rachel Whitmore was about to do. Rachel called her from the galley and told her she was going to remove my daughter. Diane checked the system and confirmed Emma was verified and in the right seat. She told Rachel to leave it alone. Rachel ignored her, and Diane did nothing. Why do you want her to testify? Because silence is what makes all of this possible. The maintenance shortcuts, the buried reports, the crew misconduct, none of it works without people who see it happening and say nothing. I don't want to punish Diane. I want America to hear what silence sounds like when it comes out of a real person's mouth. 6 days after the grounding, Skybridge was hemorrhaging. 1,700 flights canceled. $4.2 billion in market value erased. Class action lawsuits filed in 3 federal districts. The Department of Justice opened a preliminary criminal investigation into the maintenance fraud allegations. 3 more maintenance technicians came forward with their own documentation, their own stories, their own buried safety reports. Carlos Rivera, the technician who had flagged the wing spar fatigue cracking and been overridden, held a press conference in front of Skybridge's maintenance hangar in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He stood there in his work coveralls, a man with 19 years of experience and grease under his fingernails. And he said, "I told them the metal was cracked. They told me to sign off and move on. I signed. I shouldn't have. 300 people flew on that airplane, and I knew it wasn't right. That's something I'm going to carry for the rest of my life." His voice broke on the last sentence. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and walked away from the microphones. That clip got 23 million views in 24 hours, 8 days after the grounding. Emma's hospital room. Daniel was sitting next to her bed when Emma looked at her left hand for a long time. She hadn't tried to move the fingers. The cast covered most of her forearm, but her fingers were exposed, swollen, discolored. "Daddy, I want to try." "The doctor said to wait, sweetheart." "I know, but I want to try." He looked at her face. That same calm, steady expression she'd had in seat 1A when she told Rachel Whitmore she wasn't moving. Determination that didn't belong in an 8-year-old, but lived in this one like it was born there. "Okay, try." Emma looked at her hand. She focused. Her thumb moved. Her index finger curled slightly. Her middle finger twitched. Then she tried the ring finger. Nothing. She tried the pinky. Nothing. She tried again. Harder. Her whole body tensed with the effort. Her face turned red. Her teeth clenched. Nothing. She looked at Daniel. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. "They won't move, Daddy." Daniel took her hand, held it gently, kissed each finger that wouldn't move. "It's early, baby. The doctor said nerves take time, months. It's only been a week. But what if they never move? Then we figure out what comes next. Together. I don't want to figure out what comes next. I want to play piano." Her voice cracked on the last word, and then the tears came. Not the loud, sharp tears from the airplane. Something worse. The quiet, defeated tears of a child who has just realized, for the first time in her young life, that wanting something badly enough doesn't mean you get to have it. Daniel held her. He didn't say it would be okay. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just held her and let her cry, and felt every tear like a match struck against his ribs. And he thought about Thomas Britton in his boardroom, and Richard Caldwell deleting emails, and Alan Marsh offering settlements, and Rachel Whitmore calling a compound fracture a misunderstanding. These people took his daughter's music. They took the thing that made her feel understood, and they wanted him to sign a piece of paper and go away quietly. He held Emma tighter and whispered into her hair so softly that only she could hear it. Nobody is getting away with this, not one of them. 2 weeks after the grounding. The phone call that changed everything. Daniel was driving back from the hospital when his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He was running on 4 hours of sleep a night and hospital cafeteria coffee and the kind of slow-burning adrenaline that keeps a man upright when his body is begging him to collapse. He answered anyway. Captain Carter, my name is James Whitfield. I'm a producer at CBS News. We'd like to offer you an exclusive interview, 60 minutes. Daniel pulled over. I'm listening. We want to tell the full story, not just the video, not just the grounding, the maintenance fraud, the internal cover-up, the culture, everything. We've been investigating Skybridge independently for 6 months, based on a tip from a former employee. Your documentation confirms what we suspected. We want you on camera. When? Before the Senate hearing. We want America to see the man behind the story before he walks into that chamber. Daniel stared through the windshield. He was parked on the shoulder of the Long Island Expressway. Cars streamed past. People going home to their families. People who had no idea that the planes they'd been flying on were held together by deferred inspections and buried reports, and the silence of men who knew better. I'll do it, he said. But I have one condition. Name it. You interview Emma too. Not about the arm, about the piano. I want people to know what was taken from her. Not just a bone, a dream, an 8-year-old girl's dream. I want them to see her face when she talks about it. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. We can do that. Good, then we have a deal. Daniel hung up. He sat in his car on the side of the highway and he put his hands on the steering wheel, and for the first time since it all started, his hands were shaking. Not fear, not exhaustion. Something else. The feeling a man gets when he's been holding a wall up by himself for days, and he finally sees someone walking toward him to help carry the weight. He wasn't alone in this anymore. The whole country was about to hear what he had to say. And Skybridge Airways, from its CEO to its boardroom to its maintenance hangars to the woman who broke his daughter's arm, was about to learn what happens when a quiet man with 22 years of evidence decides he's done being quiet. The 60 Minutes interview aired on a Sunday evening, 3 weeks after the grounding, and 68 million Americans watched it. Daniel sat across from the interviewer in a plain room with nothing behind him but a gray wall. No flags, no bookshelves, no props. Just a man in a white shirt with 4 stripes on his shoulders and 22 years of truth sitting in a folder on his lap. The interviewer asked him the first question. Captain Carter, why did you go to the FAA? Because my airline was flying broken airplanes, and nobody inside the company was willing to stop it. Skybridge has called you a disgruntled employee on a personal vendetta. They say the maintenance issues you reported were within acceptable deferral parameters. How do you respond to that? Daniel opened the folder. He held up a photograph. It was a close-up of a wing spar fitting. Even on camera, even to people who knew nothing about aviation, the crack was visible. A jagged line running through metal that was supposed to hold a wing to a fuselage. This is the fitting that Carlos Rivera flagged 18 months ago. His supervisor overrode him and returned the aircraft to service. This airplane flew 47 more revenue flights, carrying up to 312 passengers each time. If this fitting had failed during severe turbulence, the wing separates. There is no acceptable deferral parameter for a cracked wing. There's alive and there's dead. That's it. The interviewer paused. That's a strong statement. It's not a statement, it's physics. Then the interview shifted. The interviewer turned to a second camera and said, "We also spoke with Emma Carter, Captain Carter's 8-year-old daughter, who was assaulted on Skybridge Flight 2416. Emma appeared on screen. She was sitting in a chair that was too big for her, her left arm in a cast, her right hand folded in her lap. She looked small. She looked exactly like what she was, a child. Emma, can you tell me what you love about playing piano?" Emma thought about it. She took her time the way she always did. When I play, it's like I'm talking to people, but I don't have to find the right words. The music says it for me, and they understand. Can you play right now? Emma looked at her left hand. She tried to move her ring finger, then her pinky. The camera caught it. The effort, the concentration, the stillness where movement should have been. No, she said, they don't work. How does that make you feel? Emma's chin trembled. She pressed her lips together. She was trying so hard not to cry on television that it made 68 million people cry instead. It feels like someone took my voice away, she said. The interview cut back to Daniel. The interviewer asked, "What did you feel when you saw your daughter's arm?" Daniel was quiet for 4 seconds. On television, 4 seconds of silence is an eternity. The camera held on his face, his jaw working, his eyes steady but wet. I felt like I failed her. I was 20 feet away. I heard her scream, and I was 20 feet away, and I didn't get there in time. You couldn't have known. I know that. But knowing it doesn't change the feeling. A father is supposed to protect his child. I was right there, and I didn't protect her. What made you decide to go beyond the criminal case against Rachel Whitmore and take on the entire airline? Because Rachel Whitmore is not the disease. She's a symptom. She operated in a system that never checked her, never corrected her, never held her accountable for years of complaints. The same system that never checked the maintenance logs, never corrected the deferred inspections, never held executives accountable when they put revenue over lives. It's the same sickness, the same rot. It just showed up in a different way on that airplane. Skybridge says you're trying to destroy them. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I'm trying to make sure that when a mechanic says a wing is cracked, somebody listens. And when a child says, "This is my seat," nobody breaks her arm for it. The interview ended. The country sat in silence for about 10 seconds. Then every phone in America started ringing. Monday morning, the Senate Commerce Committee hearing, Washington, D.C., 9 a.m. sharp. The hearing room was packed, standing room only. Every major network had cameras positioned along the walls. The gallery was filled with reporters, aviation industry representatives, union officials, and 3 rows of ordinary passengers who had filed complaints against Skybridge over the past 5 years and been ignored. Senator Patricia Holloway opened the proceedings. This committee convenes today to examine the safety practices, corporate governance, and crew conduct standards of Skybridge Airways. The allegations before us are serious: systemic maintenance fraud, willful disregard for federal aviation safety regulations, and a corporate culture that prioritized profit over the safety of passengers and crew. She looked directly into the camera. Let me be clear. This is not a political exercise. This is about whether Americans can trust that the airplane they board with their children, their parents, their loved ones is safe to fly. That trust has been shattered. We are here to find out why. Daniel was the first witness called. He walked to the table, sat down, adjusted the microphone. He was wearing his captain's uniform, 4 stripes, wings, 22 years of service visible on his shoulders. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then he talked for 47 minutes. He walked the committee through everything. The first safety report he filed 2 years ago, the form letter response, the second report, the phone call from his fleet manager telling him to back off, the third report, the meeting with Richard Caldwell where he was told to stop being a problem, the decision to start collecting evidence quietly, the folder he built, document by document, over 26 months. He read emails into the record. He presented maintenance logs. He showed photographs of structural deficiencies that had been signed off as acceptable. He named names: Caldwell, Webb, Britton. He didn't shout. He didn't perform. He laid it out the way he would brief a crew before a flight. Clear, sequential, undeniable. When he finished, the room was silent. Senator Holloway asked one final question. "Captain Carter, you risked your career, your pension, and your reputation to bring this information forward. Would you do it again?" "Senator, I would do it every single time. Because the next plane that falls out of the sky because somebody deferred an inspection to save money, doesn't care about my pension. It only cares about physics, and physics always wins. The second witness changed everything. Diane Marsh took the stand at 11:15 a.m. She was shaking before she sat down. Her hands were folded in her lap so tightly, her fingers were white. She had a lawyer sitting behind her, but the lawyer couldn't help her now. She was under oath, and the whole country was watching. Senator Holloway's tone was different with Diane. Not hostile, not gentle, patient. The patience of a woman who wanted every word to land exactly where it needed to. Ms. Marsh, you were a flight attendant on Skybridge Flight 2416, correct? Yes, Senator. And you received a phone call from Rachel Whitmore during the flight regarding the child in seat 1A? Yes. Tell us what she said. Diane swallowed. Rachel called from the first-class galley. She said there was a child in 1A and something was off. She wanted me to verify the seating. And what did you find when you checked? The child was verified. VIP notation. Captain's family. Everything was in order. Did you tell Rachel Whitmore that? Yes. I told her the booking was clean and to leave it alone. And what did Rachel say? Diane's voice dropped. She said she didn't care what the system said. She said the child didn't match. The hearing room went very still. Didn't match, Holloway repeated. What did you understand that to mean? Diane's chin dropped to her chest. She was quiet for 5 seconds. 6. 7. I understood exactly what it meant. And what did you do? Nothing. Her voice broke. I did nothing. I hung up the phone and I went back to work and I let her do what she was going to do. Why? Diane looked up, tears running down both cheeks. Because I was afraid of her. Because she had seniority. Because every time someone challenged Rachel, nothing happened to her and something happened to them. Because I told myself it wasn't my responsibility. Because it was easier to look away. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. I heard that little girl scream from the galley. I heard the bone break. And I knew that if I had walked out there and stood between Rachel and that child, it wouldn't have happened. I knew it then, and I know it now, and I will know it for the rest of my life. The gallery was silent. A woman in the third row was crying. A man next to her had his hand over his mouth. Holloway let the silence hold for a long moment. Then she said, "Thank you, Ms. Marsh. Your honesty may be the most important testimony this committee hears today." Diane stood up, walked past the cameras, walked past the reporters, walked out of the building, and sat on a bench in the hallway and sobbed until her attorney came to find her. 2:15 p.m. Rachel Whitmore took the stand. Her attorney, Victor Phelps, had spent the last 3 weeks preparing her. He'd coached her on tone, on eye contact, on how to express remorse without admitting liability. He'd rehearsed answers with her for 40 hours. He told her the most important thing was to appear human. Rachel sat down. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the committee, the cameras, the gallery full of people who hated her. Senator Holloway began. Ms. Whitmore, on the day in question, you approached an 8-year-old child in seat 1A and attempted to remove her from her assigned seat. Is that correct? Senator, I was performing my duties as senior purser. I had concerns about a seating discrepancy, and I was attempting to resolve it. The system showed no discrepancy. Your colleague, Diane Marsh, confirmed this to you during the flight. Why did you proceed? In my experience, the system isn't always accurate. I used my judgment. Your judgment led you to physically grab a child's arm and pull her while she was restrained by a seatbelt. The child's arm broke. How do you account for that? Rachel's attorney leaned forward and whispered something. Rachel nodded. It was never my intention to harm that child. I deeply regret what happened. It was a tragic accident. An accident? Yes, Senator. Holloway nodded slowly. Then she turned to her aide. Play the video. The lights dimmed slightly. On a 40-foot screen behind the committee, the cabin video began to play. Gregory Harmon's recording. High definition, clear audio. Rachel's voice filled the chamber. If you do not get up right now, I will call the captain. I will have this plane turned around, and you will be escorted off by security in handcuffs. Then Emma's voice, small and steady. "My daddy told me to sit here. I'm not moving." Then Rachel grabbing the arm, Emma screaming, the pull, the snap. That sound. In a room built for Senate hearings, a room with marble floors and 40-foot ceilings, the snap of a child's bone echoed like a rifle shot. Several people in the gallery gasped. One woman stood up and left. A senator on the committee removed his glasses and pressed his fingers to his eyes. The video continued, Rachel stepping back, staring down at the child, not moving to help, not reaching for a first aid kit, standing there, recalculating. Then Daniel walking out of the cockpit, the slow, measured steps, the kneeling, the hand pressed to his chest. "Daddy's here." The video ended. Holloway turned back to Rachel. "You described this as an accident. What we just watched was a grown woman threatening an 8-year-old child, physically assaulting her while she was restrained, and then standing over her while she screamed in pain without offering any assistance. At what point in that sequence does the word accident apply?" Rachel's face was gray. Her attorney whispered again. Rachel shook her head. "Mrs. Whitmore?" "The child," Rachel started, then stopped. She looked at the screen where the frozen frame still showed Emma's face contorted in agony. "The child broke her own arm. She twisted. She jerked away. The seatbelt caused the injury, not my actions." The room erupted. Voices from the gallery. A senator slammed his hand on the desk. Holloway gavelled for order. "The child broke her own arm," Holloway repeated, her voice flat and incredulous. "Ms. Whitmore, you are under oath. You are testifying before the United States Senate, and you just told this committee that an 8-year-old girl broke her own arm." Rachel said nothing. Her attorney put his hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off. "No further questions for this witness," Holloway said, "but I want the record to reflect exactly what was said here today." 4 p.m., the final witness of the day, Thomas Britton, CEO of Skybridge Airways. Britton walked to the table with the posture of a man who still believed he could talk his way out of anything. 17 years running an airline, billions in revenue, political connections, board members who owed him favors. He'd survived downturns, fuel crises, a pandemic. He would survive this. He sat down. He swore the oath. He smiled at Senator Holloway. She did not smile back. "Mr. Britton, were you aware that your airline was operating aircraft with overdue structural inspections?" "Senator, Skybridge operates within all FAA-mandated maintenance parameters. We have a robust safety management system and a dedicated team of professionals who ensure our fleet meets or exceeds all regulatory requirements." "That's not what I asked. Were you personally aware that structural inspections were being deferred beyond allowable intervals?" "I was aware that scheduling decisions sometimes require flexibility. That is standard practice across the industry." "Were you aware of the email sent by your VP of Operations, Richard Caldwell, directing your maintenance director to, and I quote, extend the intervals and use the deferral provisions creatively?" Britton's smile faded. "I'd have to review the specific communication you're referencing." "It's on the screen behind you." Britton didn't turn around. He knew what was there. "Mr. Britton, Captain Daniel Carter filed 3 internal safety reports over a period of 6 months, raising concerns about deferred maintenance. What action did the company take in response?" "I'm not personally familiar with every internal report filed by every employee." "You're the CEO." "We have systems in place to handle safety concerns at the appropriate level. Those systems failed. 3 reports. 3 times a senior captain raised the alarm, and the response was a form letter, a phone call telling him to back off, and a meeting where your VP told him to stop being a problem. Is that what you call handling safety concerns at the appropriate level?" Britton's jaw tightened. The mask was slipping. "Captain Carter had certain concerns. Those concerns were evaluated and addressed through our existing processes." Addressed. The aircraft with the cracked wing spar fitting flew 47 more revenue flights after the concern was raised. 300 passengers per flight. That's over 14,000 people on an airplane that your own technician flagged as unsafe. Addressed? Britton didn't answer. Mr. Britton, your airline's employee broke a child's arm on one of your aircraft. Your maintenance program was found to be in systemic noncompliance with federal safety regulations. Your internal safety reporting system buried legitimate concerns from both pilots and mechanics, and your response, before coming to this hearing, was to offer the child's father a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement attached. Do you have anything to say to Emma Carter? Britton looked at his lawyer. His lawyer looked at the table. Mr. Britton, your microphone is on. The country is watching. Do you have anything to say to the 8-year-old girl whose arm your employee broke while your airline was flying planes that should have been grounded? Britton leaned forward. For a moment, it looked like he might actually say something real, something human. The gallery held its breath. On the advice of counsel, Britton said, I respectfully invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The gallery exploded. Holloway gavelled. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions that no one answered. And in a hospital room 4 hours north, Laura Carter sat next to Emma's bed and watched it on her phone, with the volume low so Emma wouldn't hear. She watched the CEO of the airline that broke her daughter's arm refuse to apologize on national television. She watched him hide behind a constitutional right designed to protect the innocent, while 14,000 passengers' safety had been gambled away for quarterly earnings. She turned off the phone. She looked at Emma, who was asleep, her left hand resting on the blanket, the fingers that wouldn't move curled gently inward. Laura reached over and placed her hand on top of her daughter's broken one. She held it there, and she said, out loud, to nobody and to everybody, "Burn it all down, Daniel." 48 hours after the hearing, the Department of Justice moved. Federal agents served search warrants on Skybridge corporate headquarters at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. 16 agents, 4 vehicles. They carried out boxes of documents, hard drives, and sealed evidence bags. Employees arriving for work that morning walked past the agents and said nothing. Some of them turned around and went home. Richard Caldwell was arrested at his house in Westchester County at 6:15 a.m. He was in his bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee, when agents showed him the warrant. His wife watched from the doorway. His 14-year-old son watched from the stairs. Marcus Webb, director of maintenance, was arrested at Newark Airport, where he was attempting to board a flight to Toronto. He had a suitcase with enough clothes for 2 weeks and $38,000 in cash. Thomas Britton was arrested at his office. He was sitting at his desk when the agents walked in. His attorney was already on the phone. It didn't matter. The charges were federal: aviation fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, willful violation of federal aviation safety regulations resulting in the endangerment of human life. Each charge carried a maximum sentence of 20 years. The news broke at 7:45 a.m. Every network, every platform, every screen in every airport in America showed the same footage of Skybridge executives being led to federal vehicles in handcuffs. And in that hospital room, Emma Carter woke up, saw her mother crying, and said, "Mommy, what happened?" Laura wiped her eyes. She took Emma's good hand and squeezed it. "The people who hurt you," Laura said, "they're not going to hurt anybody else." Emma thought about that for a second. Then she said, "Good." She closed her eyes and went back to sleep. And 4 hours south, in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, Daniel Carter sat in the hallway waiting to give his deposition. His phone buzzed, a text from Laura. 2 words: "It's done." He put the phone in his pocket. He leaned his head back against the wall. He closed his eyes. It wasn't done. Not yet. There would be trials, sentencing, appeals, months of legal warfare. The airline would file for bankruptcy. Thousands of employees who had nothing to do with any of this would lose their jobs. Families would be disrupted. Pensions would be threatened. The ripple effects would spread for years. But the machine was broken now, cracked open, exposed to daylight. And every person who had chosen profit over safety, silence over truth, power over a child's dignity, was standing in that light with nowhere left to hide. Daniel opened his eyes. A federal attorney was walking toward him with a folder. "Captain Carter, they're ready for you." He stood up, straightened his uniform, walked into the room, and kept telling the truth. The trials lasted 7 months. Rachel Whitmore went first. Her attorney, Victor Phelps, tried every strategy in the book. He argued the seatbelt caused the fracture, not Rachel's grip. He brought in a biomechanics expert who testified that the angle of force was ambiguous. He attempted to paint Emma as a difficult, uncooperative child who escalated a routine interaction. The prosecution played the video 4 times. 4 times the jury watched Rachel grab that arm. 4 times they heard Emma scream. 4 times they saw Rachel step back and stand there without reaching for help. On the 3rd day of trial, the prosecution called Gregory Harmon to the stand. Gregory walked in wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars, sat down, and told the truth with the precision of a man who had spent 20 years in boardrooms where every word mattered. Mr. Harmon, what did you observe? I observed a senior flight attendant approach an 8-year-old child who was seated in her assigned seat. The child presented a valid boarding pass. The flight attendant refused to accept it. She escalated. She threatened. And when the child would not leave her seat, the flight attendant grabbed her arm and pulled upward while the child was restrained by a locked seatbelt. The child's arm broke. The flight attendant released her and stood there. She did not call for medical assistance. She did not press the emergency call button. She began making excuses before the child stopped screaming. Did you intervene? I stood up and told her to stop. She ordered me to sit down and called it a crew matter. I was on my feet for approximately 4 seconds before the bone broke. I wasn't fast enough. His voice caught on that last sentence. He paused, cleared his throat. I wasn't fast enough, and I think about that every day. Why did you record the incident? Because I have spent my career in finance, and if there is one thing I've learned, it's that powerful institutions make evidence disappear. I recorded it so that little girl would have proof, because I knew, the second I heard that snap, that someone was going to try to make this go away. The defense had no cross-examination questions for Gregory Harmon. There was nothing to ask. The man had a video that spoke louder than any attorney ever could. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 41 minutes. Guilty. Aggravated assault on a minor. Rachel stood motionless when the verdict was read. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. She shrugged it off. She stared straight ahead at nothing, her face locked in the same expression she'd worn standing over Emma in that first-class cabin. Not guilt, not remorse. Disbelief that this was actually happening to her. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge, a 64-year-old woman named Judge Patricia Hawkins, looked at Rachel for a long time before she spoke. Ms. Whitmore, in my 31 years on the bench, I have seen acts of violence committed in rage, in passion, in desperation. What I saw in that video was none of those things. What I saw was contempt. You looked at that child and you decided she didn't belong. You didn't decide that because of a seating discrepancy. You decided it because of who she was. And when she had the courage to tell you that you were wrong, you broke her arm. You broke an 8-year-old girl's arm because she wouldn't obey an order that never should have been given. Rachel's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client, sit down, Mr. Phelps. I'm not finished. Phelps sat. The victim in this case, Emma Carter, had a dream. She was going to be a pianist. She practiced every day. Her teacher described her as gifted. That dream now depends on whether damaged nerves in her hand will heal. That's not a certainty. That's a coin flip. You gave an 8-year-old girl a coin flip on her future because you couldn't tolerate her presence in a seat she paid for. Judge Hawkins delivered the sentence: 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised probation, lifetime ban from employment in the aviation industry, mandatory restitution for all medical expenses. Rachel was led out in handcuffs. She didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked Daniel for a reaction. He gave them one sentence: 5 years for my daughter's arm. I'll take it. But the arm was never the whole story. He was right. The bigger trial was already underway. Thomas Britton, Richard Caldwell, and Marcus Webb faced federal charges together: aviation fraud, conspiracy, willful violation of safety regulations resulting in endangerment of human life. The Department of Justice brought everything Daniel had given them and everything the Senate subpoenas had uncovered. And what the subpoenas uncovered was worse than even Daniel had imagined. Internal documents showed that Skybridge had been deferring critical inspections not for months, but for years on certain aircraft. One wide-body jet, tail number N447SB, had gone 23 months past its mandatory D-check interval. It had flown 714 revenue flights in that period, carrying an estimated 219,000 passengers. A metallurgical analysis ordered by the FAA after the grounding found fatigue cracking in the wing root structure of N447SB. The cracks were within millimeters of the failure threshold. The prosecutor held up the report in the courtroom and said this aircraft was 714 flights and 219,000 passengers away from a catastrophic structural failure. And the defendants knew. They had the data. They had the warnings. They chose to keep flying. Caldwell's defense was that he was following industry norms. His attorney argued that every airline defers maintenance to manage schedules and that Caldwell had no intent to endanger anyone. The prosecution called Carlos Rivera. Carlos walked to the stand in work boots and a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit right because he'd bought it that morning at a Walmart on the drive to the courthouse. He wasn't polished. He wasn't rehearsed. He was a mechanic who knew metal. Mr. Rivera, you flagged the wing spar crack on aircraft N447SB. Tell the court what happened. I found the crack during a routine inspection. It was visible to the naked eye. I documented it, photographed it, and submitted a grounding recommendation to my supervisor. And what did your supervisor do? He told me to sign off on the aircraft. He said operations needed it back on the line by morning. Did you sign? Carlos paused. His jaw tightened. Yes, sir. I signed. My supervisor stood over me and watched me sign. I asked him what happens if that crack propagates. He said, and I'll never forget this, he said, don't worry about it. Metal flexes. That's what it does. Metal flexes. That's what he said, and I knew it was wrong. I knew a crack in a wing spar fitting doesn't flex, it grows. Every flight cycle, every pressurization, every landing, it grows. And if it grows enough, the wing comes off. I knew that. I've known that since my first year of training. But I signed the paper because I was afraid of losing my job. I had 2 kids, a mortgage. I told myself somebody above me would catch it. Somebody smarter, somebody with more authority would see it and ground the airplane. Did anyone ground the airplane? No, sir. Not until Captain Carter went to the FAA. That airplane flew for 11 more months after I signed that paper. Carlos wiped his face. I don't sleep much anymore. I keep doing the math. 714 flights, 300 people a flight. I keep multiplying those numbers, and I keep thinking about what would have happened if that wing came off over the Atlantic at 40,000 feet. And then I think about the fact that I signed the paper that let it keep flying. The courtroom was silent. I'm not asking for sympathy, Carlos said. I'm asking you to understand that when a company puts that kind of pressure on a man, when they stand over you and tell you to sign, and you know that saying no means losing everything, most people sign. That doesn't make it right, but that's how it works. That's how these things happen. Not because of evil people, because of scared people in a system that punishes honesty. The trial lasted 4 more weeks after Carlos Rivera's testimony, but everyone in that courtroom knew it was over the moment he said the word signed. Thomas Britton was convicted on all counts, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His attorney filed an appeal. It was denied. Richard Caldwell received 8 years. He cried when the sentence was read. His wife left the courtroom without looking at him. Marcus Webb, who had tried to flee to Canada with $38,000 in cash, received 10 years. The attempted flight was treated as consciousness of guilt. The judge added 2 years for obstruction. Skybridge Airways filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy liquidation 3 weeks after the verdicts. Not Chapter 11, not restructuring, liquidation. The airline ceased to exist. 31 years of operation ended with a judge's signature and a padlock on the corporate headquarters. 9,000 employees lost their jobs. Daniel thought about that. He thought about the mechanics, the gate agents, the flight attendants who had nothing to do with any of this. Good people who showed up every day and did their jobs and got caught in the collapse of a company rotted out from the top. He didn't feel good about it. He didn't celebrate. He carried it the way a surgeon carries the knowledge that saving a patient sometimes means cutting away healthy tissue to reach the disease. It was necessary. It was still painful. 8 months after the sentencing, a Tuesday afternoon in the physical therapy clinic at Columbia University Medical Center, Emma sat at a table with her left hand resting on a foam pad. Her therapist, a woman named Dr. Yoon, sat across from her. "Okay, Emma, let's try again. Ring finger. Slow. Don't force it." Emma stared at her hand. She focused. Her thumb was fine. Index finger? Perfect. Middle finger? Strong. The ring finger had started showing small movements 3 weeks ago. Tiny. Barely perceptible. But real. She concentrated. The ring finger curled. Slowly. Halfway. Then a little more. Dr. Yoon smiled. "That's your best one yet." "Now the pinky," Emma said. "Emma, we've talked about this. The pinky is going to take longer. The ulnar nerve damage was most significant in that area. We need to be patient." "I know, but I want to try." She tried. She stared at the smallest finger on her left hand and willed it to move with everything she had. Nothing. She tried again. A twitch. Tiny, like a spark. "Did you see that?" Emma whispered. Dr. Yoon leaned in. "Do it again." Emma tried. The pinky twitched. Not a curl, not a bend, a twitch. But it was the first voluntary movement in that finger since the break. Dr. Yoon grabbed Emma's face with both hands and kissed her forehead. "You brilliant girl. That's a nerve reconnection. That's real." Emma looked at Daniel, who was standing in the doorway. She held up her left hand. "Daddy, it moved." Daniel walked over. He knelt down. He took her hand and looked at the pinky. "Show me." She focused. The twitch came again. Daniel pressed his forehead to her hand. He stayed there for a long time. When he lifted his head, his eyes were red. "That's my girl." Dr. Yoon was honest with them afterward. "This is a very good sign. The nerve is regenerating, but I need to manage expectations. Concert-level piano requires a degree of fine motor control that may still be beyond what this nerve can deliver. She may play again. She may play well. But the level she was progressing toward before the injury, I can't promise that comes back." Daniel nodded. "What can you promise?" "Progress. That finger is going to keep getting stronger. How strong? Only time will tell." That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table in his apartment in Queens with a legal pad and a pen. Laura was there. They'd been spending more time together since the trial. Not as a couple, as parents. As two people bound together by a child and a catastrophe, and a shared understanding that some things matter more than whatever broke them apart. "The settlement funds came through," Daniel said. Laura looked up. "How much?" "More than enough." "More than enough for what?" Daniel slid the legal pad across the table. On it, in his careful handwriting, were 2 words. Carter Aviation Academy. Laura read it again, looked at him. A flight school? A free flight school for kids who can't afford lessons. Kids who dream of flying but never get the chance because nobody opens the door for them. "Daniel, that's the entire settlement." "I know. That money was for Emma." "It is for Emma. Everything I do for the rest of my life is for Emma. But she's going to grow up, Laura. And when she grows up, I want her to look at what came out of the worst thing that ever happened to her and see something that mattered. Not a bank account. Something that changed lives." Laura stared at him for a long time. Then she picked up the pen and wrote underneath his 2 words, "Equal access to the sky." "If you're going to do this," she said, "do it right." 14 months later, upstate New York, a small private airfield 40 minutes north of the city. Daniel had leased a hangar, a classroom building, and 200 feet of runway. He'd purchased 3 training aircraft, yellow Cessna 172s with the Carter Aviation Academy logo painted on the tail. He'd recruited 4 flight instructors, all retired military or commercial pilots who volunteered their time. He'd set up a scholarship program that covered everything: tuition, materials, flight hours, equipment, for any kid between 12 and 18 who qualified based on financial need. The first class had 22 students, 12 girls, 10 boys. They came from the Bronx, from Harlem, from Newark, from Bridgeport. Kids who had never been inside a cockpit. Kids who had never touched a yoke. Kids who looked up at airplanes and dreamed, the way Emma once dreamed about concert halls. Opening day. Daniel stood in front of them in the classroom. No uniform, jeans, a polo shirt. He looked different out of the captain's stripes. Smaller, more human. But when he spoke, every kid in that room went silent. 2 years ago, something happened to my daughter on an airplane. Some of you know the story. I'm not going to tell it again. What I'm going to tell you is why you're here. You're here because somebody once told you, or showed you, or made you feel that the sky wasn't for you, that flying was for other people, richer people, different people, people who didn't look like you or come from where you come from. He paused, looked at their faces, 14, 15, 16 years old, eyes wide. That's a lie. The sky doesn't check your bank account. It doesn't check your zip code. It doesn't care where you went to school or what your parents do for a living. The sky is for anyone brave enough to leave the ground. And that's what we're going to teach you here. Not just how to fly, how to believe you're allowed to. A girl in the front row, 15 years old, name was Jasmine, raised her hand. "Captain Carter, is your daughter going to fly too?" Daniel smiled. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" The classroom door opened. Emma walked in. 10 years old now, taller. The braids were gone, replaced by a short, natural cut that framed her face. She wore jeans and sneakers and a t-shirt that said, "Pilot in Training," in block letters. Her left arm carried a scar that ran from her wrist to the middle of her forearm. A thin white line, a permanent record. She walked to the front of the room and stood next to her father. "Hi," she said. "I'm Emma." 22 kids stared at her. They knew who she was. Every kid in America knew who she was. Jasmine asked, "Can you still play piano?" Emma held up her left hand. She curled her fingers slowly. All 5. The ring finger moved with a slight delay. The pinky curled halfway, trembling slightly with the effort. "I can play," Emma said. "Not as well as before. Maybe not ever as well as before. But I can play." "Does it make you mad? What happened?" Emma thought about it. She took her time the way she always did. It used to make me really mad. I would sit at the piano and try to play something I used to play easily, and my fingers wouldn't do it, and I would want to scream. I broke a music stand once, threw it across the room. A few kids laughed. Emma smiled. But then my dad told me something. He said the sky is really big, and there's more than one way to fly. So I'm learning a new way. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "You ready?" "I'm ready." They walked out of the classroom together, across the tarmac, past the 2 other Cessnas, to the third one, parked at the edge of the runway. This one was different. Daniel had worked with an aviation engineer to modify the control yoke. The grip was reshaped to accommodate reduced dexterity in the left hand. The throttle was repositioned 6 inches closer to center so Emma could reach it comfortably. Every modification was FAA approved. Every adjustment was built around what Emma's hand could do, not what it couldn't. Emma climbed into the left seat. Daniel climbed into the right. He was her instructor. He would always be her instructor. She put on the headset, adjusted it, ran through the checklist the way he'd taught her. Fuel, controls, instruments, trim. She did it slowly, carefully, the same way she used to approach a new piece of music, learning the structure before she played a single note. "Ready?" Daniel asked through the headset. Emma looked down the runway. She thought about seat 1A. She thought about Rachel's hand on her arm. She thought about the snap. She thought about the hospital and the surgery and the months of therapy and the pinky that still didn't work right and might never work right. She thought about Chopin and the sound of a piano in an empty room and the feeling of speaking without words. And then she thought about the sky, how big it was, how it didn't belong to anyone, how you didn't need a boarding pass or a VIP notation or anyone's permission to be up there. She pushed the throttle forward. "I belong up there," she said. The engine roared, the Cessna rolled, the wheels left the ground, and Emma Carter, 10 years old, scarred but unbroken, lifted into a sky that nobody could ever take away from her. Behind her, on the ground, 22 kids stood outside the classroom and watched the little yellow airplane climb. Jasmine had her hand over her